Hi, John. How are you this week?
Good, Elliot. How are you doing?
I'm okay too, thanks. So the Transparency International, who we've talked about before, put out their corruption perception index for 2021. Did you see that release?
Yeah, like you said, we've talked about this before, and it continues to be a very useful tool for our community because, as we know, and we're getting that as a focus in the U.S. as a priority, that corruption drives financial crime or vice versa. And I think understanding what outside organizations think of different jurisdictions should help, not just in terms of training, but due diligence, what to focus on, where there's progress, where there's decline. So yeah, useful tool. I think everybody on all sides of the equation respect Transparency International. 180 countries that they look at, and I thought there was some interesting statistics. The overall comment that it was made is things aren't going that great, and I think that's something to focus on. And they talk about the top and bottom performers and who's declined, what are some of the issues. But the bottom line is their overall view is that things have not improved, particularly during COVID, like there was hope that it would.
Right. So on a net basis, well, let me do it a different way. So there's 25 countries improved, 23 declined, and 131 stayed the same. So basically, one step to the side on a net basis. And it was interesting, even some countries that have been well positioned in the top group had some noticeable step backs, one being Canada, based on the criteria that are listed out on the Transparency International website. They moved a -8, so they were up pretty high. They were up near 80, but they still took a significant step back, which is, I think it's more broadly, it's an interesting commentary on the fact that even when you're doing well in one of these difficult areas, maintaining doing well requires vigilance and is not a guarantee.
Right. And, the Transparency International folks have had sort of ongoing series of recommendations to stymie or end, if you could, the vicious cycle of corruption, which they also say connects with human rights violations and democratic decline. And I thought, well, they're hortatory goals, they're sort of illogical. So uphold the rights needed to hold power to account, restore and strengthen institutional checks on power. So they talk about sanctions and anti-corruption agencies, combating transnational forms of corruption, which the U.S. is, again, attempting to do with naming this as a priority. And one that, there might be some pushback on, although it makes sense to me, uphold the right to information and government spending. So, obviously, if you're spending money in any sort of budget that gets approved by a legislature, how's it being used? And maximum transparency is obviously a goal there. So again, nothing unusual, but I think all of those things make a ton of sense. And going back to your point, the fact that the top countries declined should be a potential cause for concern, at least in terms of more enforcement, what have you.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, they draw a direct connection between human rights and authoritarianism, and anti-corruption, and corruption. I think that their view is that the target is to put the world on a sustainable route to corruption-free societies, which is difficult, but important. Some of the countries, it's interesting, not surprising, I guess, some of the bottom countries are countries that are in the news about a variety of things, many of them with a negative connotation: Afghanistan, North Korea, Yemen, Venezuela, Somalia, Syria, and South Sudan. And I would say every one of those countries, at least in part, their notoriety is for poor human rights. But many of them we also hear regularly being talked about in terms of corruption issues. So I think it's important, again, for the community, as we think about many of the things that we try to do and to identify in the transaction flow and activity flow in our organizations, to see how all of these things do connect. Was there one thing that you took away from this that gave you a little positive feeling?
No, it's not really. Again, some of the top scores went down a bit. Transparency, small t, is always useful here, right? When you talk about a country's score, and that's their perceived level of corruption, their rank, where they are with other countries. So I think all of that, just having this is useful. But I'd give a really quick example of this in the United States, and that is, there's been a debate just recently and some legislation introduced just in the past couple of weeks, from what I understand. I could be wrong by ensuring that elected officials don't trade in stock, and you're thinking, wow, that's not already banned. And while there are some restrictions on what elected office holders can do regarding trusts in the states and that sort of thing, the bottom line is it's just open for potential corruption if you don't restrict people that are in office and have the ability either influence or gain monetarily from certain things that could increase stock prices. So that's another example, which I would imagine, if it passes in the US, will help the US score going forward. So that's I think a interesting example of how this works from a practical standpoint.
Yes, agreed. And your example is interesting because it's one of those where, and I'm sure I would get a huge amount of pushback from many people on this, where it seems like you wouldn't need a law for people to know that that's the right thing to do.
Right. Yeah.
So, all right, John.
I would just say, though, Transparency International, go to their website. This is not the staff's view on corruption. It is based on data they get from places like the World Bank, World Economic Forum, that sort of thing. So this is not a staff. This is based on data. You could always quibble about data, but that's what it's, and it's been around for quite a long period of time. Go to their website, take a look at it, and I think you'll find some really interesting facts in addition to what we just chatted about.
Yes, and we will link to the landing page where you can download the entire report on our website as part of posting this podcast. So I'll do the shameless plug. If you enjoyed This Week in AML, please tune in every Friday and listen to us, or sign up and have it subscribe with us on Spotify or Apple Podcast or wherever you get your podcast. And John, I know we're recording on Thursday, and so we're actually going to do a webinar today that people won't be able to sign up for tomorrow when this posts. So tell people about that, though, because they'll be able to see it later on.
True. It's on transaction monitoring, an important issue for all of our clients. And you'll be able to, again, log on to get it after the fact. But so please follow us on social media. Follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook, Twitter, and all the logical social media platforms. We're going to be doing a webinar in February dealing with experts talking about what else to expect in 2022 in terms of legislation guidance. We will continue to provide monthly webinars that we hope help you with not just content understanding, but also keep you current on all the things.
Perfect. Well, John, have a good weekend, and I will talk to you next week.
Take care.
Yep. Bye-bye.